Most people fear solitude. They confuse being alone with being abandoned, silence with emptiness, and stillness with insignificance. Yet solitude, in its deepest form, is not an absence, but a presence, the presence of your own soul. To embrace solitude is to step into the innermost chamber of your psyche, where the noise of the world falls away, and you finally hear the quiet voice that has always been there, your true self. Solitude is not punishment nor retreat, but initiation. And those who dare to face it discover that it is not loneliness they meet, but life itself. When you step into solitude, the first thing that happens is not peace but disorientation. The world you have been trained to perform in falls silent, and without its familiar noise, you are left standing before yourself with no mask to wear. This is the reason so many people run from solitude. It removes the illusions they have carefully constructed to survive. For most of us, life becomes a theater. We play roles: the dutiful child, the agreeable friend, the ambitious professional, and in the performance, we begin to confuse the mask with the face. Solitude disrupts this performance. It takes away the audience and leaves you with a question that is both simple and terrifying. Who am I when no one is watching? Illusions are not merely lies we tell others. They are lies we tell ourselves. We convince ourselves we are satisfied with things that quietly drain us. We pretend to enjoy company we secretly find exhausting. We pursue goals that were never truly ours, but were handed to us by society, family, or culture. As long as the stage lights are on, it is easy to maintain these illusions. But when solitude darkens the stage and the performance ends, the truth begins to surface. The absence of external validation forces you to confront what you have ignored: your dissatisfaction, your contradictions, your unmet desires. At first, this confrontation feels unbearable. The illusions we create serve a function: they protect us from painful realities. Without them, the soul feels naked, exposed. This is why many people treat solitude as an enemy. They drown it out with noise, distraction, constant connection, anything that prevents the silence from speaking. Yet it is precisely in this silence that the self can finally be heard. Solitude strips away illusions not to destroy you, but to return you to what is real, and what is real is often uncomfortable. You may realize that the life you live is not truly yours. You may discover that the relationships you cling to are born more of fear than of love. You may find that much of your ambition is not the pursuit of fulfillment, but an attempt to escape an inner emptiness. These truths sting, but they are necessary, for if you cannot face the falsehoods that shape your life, you cannot free yourself from them. Illusions may provide comfort, but they also imprison you. The gift of solitude is that it does not allow illusions to survive for long. In its stillness, pretenses collapse, and what remains is a clearer picture of who you are and what you need. This is not an easy process. It requires courage to look at yourself without adornment, to admit what you have denied, to strip away layers until something authentic emerges. But once illusions dissolve, you begin to build your life not on roles and performances, but on truth. And it is only from this foundation that a life of depth and meaning can grow. The unconscious does not announce itself with thunder. It speaks in whispers, subtle impressions, fleeting images, strange dreams, and gut feelings that are easy to dismiss in the clamor of daily life. When the world is loud, when you are constantly engaged with the demands of others, you cannot hear it. This is why solitude is essential. It creates the stillness required for the unconscious to rise to the surface. In the quiet, what was buried begins to reveal itself, often in ways that surprise, disturb, or enlighten. Solitude becomes not an escape from the world, but a descent into the depths of your own psyche. Every person carries within them a vast reservoir of material that never reaches awareness. Memories long forgotten, desires disowned, fears repressed, and potentials unrealized. These live in the unconscious, influencing behavior and perception without being consciously recognized. You might think you are acting freely when in fact unseen forces within you are pulling the strings. Solitude interrupts this automation by slowing you down and forcing you into contact with the inner world. The voices you tried to silence, the dreams you brushed aside, the contradictions you ignored, they begin to rise in the stillness, demanding to be acknowledged. Consider the nature of dreams. In the rush of ordinary life, dreams are often discarded as meaningless fragments. But in solitude, when you are attuned to your inner world, you begin to see their symbolic language. The unconscious does not communicate directly. It speaks in metaphor, image, archetype. To embrace solitude is to give these symbols space to speak, to let them reveal truths about yourself that logic alone cannot uncover. This is why so many spiritual traditions retreat into silence, because silence is the medium in which the unconscious reveals itself. At first, these revelations may be unsettling. You might encounter aspects of yourself you have denied, resentment you buried, desires you judged, grief you suppressed. The unconscious does not censor, it's simply presence. And when you are alone, without distraction, you are forced to face what surfaces. Many people fear this process because it feels like chaos, but it is actually the beginning of integration. By allowing the unconscious to speak, you make space for wholeness. What was split off from your identity can be welcomed back, no longer operating in the shadows, but as part of your conscious life. The wisdom of solitude is that it reconnects you to this hidden dimension. You realize that much of what guides you is not reason but these deeper forces, and the more you deny them, the more control they exert. By listening in solitude, you begin to collaborate with your unconscious rather than being driven blindly by it. This is the true gift of silence. It is not empty at all, but full of voices long unheard, waiting to show you who you really are. Individuation, the process of becoming your true self, is not something that can happen in the noise of the crowd. As long as your life is entangled in the constant pull of other people's expectations, you remain a fragment of yourself, shaped more by the desires of others than by the call of your own soul. Solitude, then, becomes the sacred ground where individuation can take place. It is in stepping away from the collective voice, even for a time, that you allow the quieter but far more profound voice within to emerge. Most people fear this separation because they have never lived outside of the approval of others. From childhood, we are trained to adapt to fit into family systems, cultural norms, social hierarchies. This adaptation is necessary for survival, but when it becomes the entirety of life, the individual self never truly emerges. You become a mask stitched together from the desires of your parents, the demands of society, the pressures of peers. The cost of this adaptation is the abandonment of your authentic being. Solitude confronts you with this reality. You are not fully yourself. You are the sum of what others have asked you to be. But individuation requires a breaking away. It does not mean isolation forever, nor does it mean rejecting society altogether. It means stepping back long enough to ask, what do I believe apart from what I was told? What do I desire apart from what I was conditioned to want? What values feel alive to me, even if they contradict the values of the group? These questions can only be asked in solitude, because only there are you free from the constant chorus of external voices telling you who you should be. This is not an easy process. It feels like betrayal at first, betrayal of family, of tradition, of the roles you have been praised for playing. But in reality, it is an act of fidelity to something deeper, the truth of your own nature. Individuation is not rebellion for its own sake. It is the recognition that to remain enslaved to the expectations of others is to live half a life. Only when you have faced yourself in solitude, stripped of roles and masks, can you begin to weave together the fragments into something whole, something uniquely yours. The paradox is that individuation, though born in solitude, ultimately makes you more capable of genuine connection. Once you have encountered and embraced your own individuality, you no longer relate to others out of dependency or pretense. You do not seek their approval as the price of belonging. Instead, You meet them as an equal, someone who has already claimed their own ground. Solitude births individuation, and individuation births authentic relationship with the world. Without solitude, you remain a copy. With solitude, you begin to become a self. Loneliness and solitude are often confused, yet they are fundamentally different experiences. Loneliness is the pain of absence, the ache of disconnection, the sense that something essential is missing. It is a state of deprivation where the silence feels heavy and the emptiness suffocates. Solitude, however, is not deprivation but fullness. It is not the absence of connection, but the presence of a deeper one, the connection to yourself. To feel lonely is to be estranged from yourself, while to feel solitude is to have reconciled with who you are. The same physical condition, being alone, can manifest as torment or liberation, depending on the state of your inner world. Loneliness arises when a person depends entirely on the external world for a sense of meaning or validation. If your identity is built solely on how others perceive you, then the moment you are alone, your sense of self begins to collapse. Without an audience, you feel invisible. Without constant interaction, you feel empty. Loneliness is not caused merely by the absence of others. It is caused by the absence of a relationship with yourself. The lonely person does not truly know themselves, and thus cannot bear their own company. Solitude, by contrast, is the state of being able to sit with oneself without fear or judgment. It is the recognition that your worth does not depend on constant validation, that your life has meaning even when no one is watching. In solitude, silence does not feel like punishment, but like space in which you can hear your own thoughts, feel your own emotions, and encounter the richness of your inner life. Where loneliness says, "I am not enough without others," solitude says, "I am whole, and therefore I can meet others without losing myself." The transformation from loneliness to solitude is not automatic. It requires inner work. You must face the discomfort that arises when external distractions are stripped away. At first, the silence will reveal your insecurities, your suppressed fears, and the unresolved conflicts you have buried under busyness. Many people run from this confrontation, which is why they confuse solitude with loneliness. But if you remain, if you endure the discomfort, something shifts. You begin to realize that the silence is not empty. It is alive with your own presence. You start to see that you are not simply a fragment waiting to be completed by others, but a whole being with depth and capacity that you had overlooked. Paradoxically, it is only when you embrace solitude that loneliness loses its power. Once you can sit with yourself and feel connected to your own inner world, you no longer experience aloneness as deprivation. You can then engage with others not out of desperation or fear of being left behind, but out of genuine desire to share who you are. Loneliness imprisons you in dependency, while solitude liberates you into authenticity. The difference between the two is not external circumstances, but the quality of your relationship with yourself. To enter solitude is to invite an encounter with your shadow, the part of yourself that you have repressed, denied, or disowned. The shadow is not simply a collection of flaws or shameful impulses. It is the totality of what you have refused to acknowledge about yourself, both dark and light. It includes the anger you suppress because it feels dangerous, the envy you deny because it feels unworthy, and even the talents you bury because they threaten to separate you from the collective. Most people live at war with their shadow, fearing what it might reveal. But solitude has a way of drawing it to the surface. In the stillness, when distractions fall away, you begin to sense the presence of this hidden self, and its voice grows louder. For many, this is a frightening experience. The shadow does not flatter you. It confronts you with truths you would rather avoid. It shows you how your idealized self-image crumbles under scrutiny, how the person you pretend to be is not the whole story. You may see your selfishness, your resentments, your manipulative tendencies, the ways you have failed to love or to act with integrity. These revelations can feel overwhelming, and the natural impulse is to turn away, to return to the safety of distraction. But Jung insisted that ignoring the shadow does not destroy it, it only strengthens its grip. What you repress does not disappear, it operates from the depths, shaping your behavior and your relationships without your awareness. Solitude, however, offers a rare opportunity. It provides the space to face the shadow consciously. In the silence, you can observe its movements, acknowledge its existence, and begin to integrate it into your conscious life. This does not mean indulging every dark impulse or excusing destructive behavior. Rather, it means accepting that you are not purely light, not purely good, not purely rational. You are a whole being, and wholeness includes contradiction. By confronting the shadow, you stop being ruled by it unconsciously. You begin to recognize when your anger is coloring your judgments, when your envy is distorting your choices, when your fear of inadequacy is driving your need for control. Awareness gives you the freedom to respond differently. The shadow is not only a source of darkness, it is also a reservoir of vitality. Many of the qualities we repress are not evil, but simply inconvenient to our persona. The assertiveness you deny because you were taught to be compliant. The creativity you hide because it feels impractical. The power you suppress because it intimidates others, these, too, belong to the shadow. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim this lost energy and redirect it toward growth. Solitude is the crucible in which this alchemy takes place. By facing what you fear in yourself, you not only disarm it, you also recover the strengths hidden within it. Thus, solitude becomes the path not to perfection, but to wholeness, a wholeness that includes the shadow as an essential part of who you are. When you withdraw into solitude, something paradoxical happens. Instead of cutting you off from the world, you begin to sense your connection to it more deeply. Most people imagine solitude as a wall between themselves and life, but in truth it can function as a window. In the absence of constant social noise, the subtle threads that bind you to existence reveal themselves. You notice how your moods shift with the weather, how your breath moves with the rhythm of the earth, how your thoughts echo patterns that are older than you. Solitude, far from being sterile, awakens you to the living tapestry of which you are a part. One reason many relationships and social encounters feel hollow is that they are built on dependency rather than authenticity. People approach one another not to give but to take, not to share but to fill an emptiness they cannot face alone. Solitude disrupts this cycle by teaching you how to be with yourself. When you no longer need others to mask your inner void, you can relate to them freely without desperation. You do not approach them as a beggar seeking validation, but as a whole being offering presence. This shift transforms relationships. Instead of draining exchanges of energy, they become true encounters where each person meets the other without masks. Jung often emphasized that the individual must differentiate from the collective before returning to it. Solitude is this differentiation, the step back that allows you to see the group clearly, to resist being swallowed by its unconscious currents. But individuation does not mean exile. Once you have faced yourself in solitude, you can return to the world with clarity, able to engage without losing yourself in its demands. You recognize that others are not responsible for your sense of meaning, nor are you responsible for theirs. This frees you to relate with honesty rather than manipulation, compassion rather than resentment. It is in solitude that your capacity for empathy is deepened. When you have faced your own suffering, when you have listened to the voices within you that you once rejected, you are less likely to dismiss or condemn those same qualities in others. By accepting your shadow, you make peace with human complexity, and this makes you more tolerant, more understanding. Solitude is not about turning your back on humanity. It is about preparing yourself to meet humanity on equal terms, with open eyes and an open heart. Thus, solitude strengthens your bond to the world precisely because it removes the illusion of dependency. You no longer confuse attachment with connection. You see that true intimacy with people, with nature, with life itself arises when you bring your authentic self to the encounter, not a mask begging for approval. What solitude teaches is that only by standing alone can you truly stand with others. It is in the quiet of being with yourself that you become capable of genuine communion with the vastness of existence. The common belief is that solitude makes you weak, that it isolates you, that it strips away your strength by cutting you off from others. But the reality is the opposite. Solitude, when embraced consciously, becomes a source of immense empowerment. For in solitude, you learn to rely not on the crutch of external validation, but on the strength of your own inner resources. It is here that you discover resilience, clarity, and an unshakable center that no crowd can give you and no rejection can take away. Solitude is not isolation, it is training ground. Most people fear being alone because they have never discovered the capacity that lies within them. They believe they cannot endure their own company, that without the voices of others echoing approval, they will dissolve into nothingness. This dependency is the very essence of weakness, for it places your identity and self-worth in the hands of the crowd. Solitude dismantles this illusion. It confronts you with your own reflection and asks, who are you when there is no one to applaud, no one to witness, no one to affirm your choices? If you can answer this honestly, you gain a strength that no external circumstance can shake. Consider how easily people are manipulated when they cannot bear solitude. They cling to groups, to ideologies, to relationships not because these things are authentic, but because they are terrified of facing the silence within themselves. Their fear makes them malleable, desperate, compliant. But the one who has walked through solitude is not so easily swayed. They have already faced their fears and shadows, already endured the weight of silence. Their sense of self is not tethered to the collective, and so they move with a freedom others can scarcely comprehend. Solitude thus becomes the foundation of independence. This empowerment is not loud, not arrogant, not showy. It does not need to dominate others or prove itself constantly. It is quiet, steady, rooted. In solitude, you learn that your worth does not come from comparison, from competing endlessly for attention or recognition. It comes from inhabiting your own being fully, from seeing yourself without distortion. This kind of strength does not collapse when ignored, nor does it inflate when praised. It simply endures, because it is built on the foundation of self-knowledge rather than external approval. Paradoxically, the empowerment of solitude makes you more capable of engaging with the world. Because you are no longer dependent on others for identity, you can give freely, act decisively, and relate authentically. You become less reactive, less defensive, less vulnerable to manipulation. You carry within you a stability that radiates outward, making others sense, even without words, that you cannot be easily moved or diminished. In this way, solitude does not isolate you from life, but equips you to live it more fully, more courageously, more authentically. It transforms aloneness from a weakness into a wellspring of power.